Welcome to Channel 17, the Town of Colonie Government Channel.
Hello and welcome to The Money Factor. I'm Richard Naylor, your host. Our guest today is Parham. She's Director of the Center for Faculty Excellence and Innovation at Siena College. We're going to be talking a little bit about a liberal arts education. We're going to be talking about how Siena is adapting for the future, and I'm really happy that you could be here, Claire.
Thank you for having me.
Let's start out. You know, we were talking a little bit before we started taping about a liberal arts education.
Yes.
What is it?
Well, that's a good question, and I think it's one of the many questions that people are debating not only at Siena but at other colleges. At Siena in particular, I think we have always held to the idea that we should always be a small liberal arts institution. And I think faculty members across campus believe that it's important for our students to be exposed to many aspects of education. If you're a science major, it's important that you take an English class. And that's one of the major parts of our core curriculum, that most, all students actually have to take classes outside their discipline. And I think it gives them a different perspective.
So you seem to be saying liberal arts education means a broader education.
I believe so, yes. And certain schools, I think, where you can go and get just specifically an engineering degree or specifically a math degree, and you never experience the differences that are available and that are evident in other specializations, whether it be in English or it makes people think differently. And in my department in history, I recently had a class that did not have one history major in it.
Wow. You're teaching history.
And so it was very rewarding for me to be able to not only present history to them, but to get the varying perspectives of, say, somebody who's in physics versus somebody who's in management or another.
So it works both ways. If you're in liberal arts, do you also take what do you I mean, it could be very challenging if I'm an art major or a history major and now I take a chemistry class.
Yes, you have to take, we have core courses, and you have to take all of them, and they're spread across the disciplines. So most students at Siena will be exposed to many different departments outside their own. And it creates a very interesting atmosphere for the students and for the faculty as well.
So the Renaissance isn't dead?
No, we want to keep it alive, and I think that's one of the things that Siena has been able to do very well, has always sort of stuck with its traditions and its beliefs that this type of education was important.
So I guess in the past, indulge me here, it seems like people worried about silos and you take all this chemistry, but you don't know anything, even about physics maybe, but you certainly don't know anything about history and who's running for election and how that matters. So this really spreads things out.
It does, and I think it makes very good global citizens, really. We produce students at Siena that are educated about not only the professions that they're in, but about service and about life in general and what other people around the world experience, and even people in their own community. So I think it's a very good balance, and I think it has served many of our graduates very well and will continue to.
Great. So I'm sure we'll get back to a few more general things about Siena, but let's talk a little bit about your position and the center that you run. It's got a wonderful name.
Yes, the Center for Faculty Excellence and Innovation. I can say it. It is something that was in existence at Siena for about 3 years, from 2004 to 2007. But with the new strategic plan that came in, Siena decided that it was time to make it a permanent fixture. Many other institutions have had faculty developers for decades, but Siena now is very much focused on its faculty. And one of my jobs is to not only deal with faculty as they come in for orientation and foster them through their first several years, but also to draw on the excellence and teaching innovations of faculty who are already permanent fixtures, and I don't want to call them elder statesmen at Siena.
But that's not a bad thing to be.
No.
They develop a lot of experience and knowledge and
They do. And
become
they're very
distinguished.
And they're very, I've held a lot of workshops this semester, and a lot of new techniques have been introduced. And what I found most rewarding is to fill a room with 30, 40 faculty members. And it will be a mixture of the new, the middle of the career, and the old. And
Is it a classroom?
we usually get together in a seminar room.
Sounds probably easier.
Yeah, and right now the idea is to create a community of faculty members who are interested in learning about new techniques, sharing issues that they have in the classroom.
Okay, so there's a lot of interaction.
Yes, that's part of one of the jobs as a faculty developer is to run workshops and to introduce new techniques to faculty members. And also, I've instituted something that has been debated for a long time, wanted on campus. We have an open classrooms program now where faculty members can go and visit each other's classrooms and learn different teaching techniques and go and have coffee, have lunch.
Sounds profoundly helpful.
It is very helpful, and it's something that faculty members about 20 years ago used to do when Siena was a small place. And once Siena got bigger, it was more difficult to do that.
I think the people who are maybe mostly outsiders from the educational process, who don't speak in front of groups regularly, and of course you speak in front of groups as a profession, might feel that having another professor come in would be intimidating, but it sounds like you've gotten beyond that.
I think it's actually a compliment. I think many times what will happen is students will come into your class and talk about something that exciting just happened in their previous class, or an interesting activity that took place. And many times in the past, I've wanted, and my colleagues have wanted to say, I want to come to that class too. So now what has been created is I've created a list of faculty members. Right now we have a core group of about 20. And other people are just taking it informally on their own. And it's basically created this atmosphere where people are learning from each other. And that's very important. Also, I've created an office which a lot of times faculty members don't have. And I deal as a faculty developer with sort of the wellness in the faculty member as an individual. I pride myself in shutting the door and having a cup of coffee, and everything that is said in my office is confidential. So I'm there to listen and to never make suggestions, to leave them with things to think about.
Very Socratic.
It is. It's never a good policy as a faculty developer to instruct someone. It's to provide ideas, to provide resources in literature for people to think about and come to their own conclusions.
That sounds so collegial, and that's a funny word to use with a college, but
yes.
I know that in the past and over the whole country, there may be a few departments that have a few professors who don't get along.
Yes, and that is no different at Siena. However, one thing that I think that I've been able to do is there are many issues that all faculty members deal with sometime in their career, whether it be time management, whether it be writing issues or grading issues. And when you can get together a group of faculty from across the disciplines, and there's no politics involved, it's just a discussion about learning and improving, people leave, I like to call it, their baggage at the door. And people are starting to realize that we're all educators, and we're all there for the students and to improve ourselves.
It sounds like as you're implementing it, it works a little bit like the way an executive retreat is supposed to work. Instead of always being, okay, you come into your classroom, you've got to do these research things, you've got to write papers, you've got to prepare your class, that's your job, you do that and you go home. You're actually working together with people.
And it's very beneficial. We've also, I've instituted a lot of social activities as well. Because I think really faculty members, we don't have a large faculty lounge anymore. And we used to go all gather in the lounge to go get our mail. But once
the water cooler kind of thing.
Exactly. But what I have seen is new faculty members, old faculty members, really when they get together in a social setting, a lot gets done that otherwise would not get done at a committee meeting. So my job is to do a lot of things, but I think to create a community and to create a mutual learning environment is extremely important.
That sounds like a really nice goal for the center.
It is, and I think that's what really faculty development is.
Let's now tie that into, I guess, for sure the student experience.
Mm-hmm.
Coming back to any faculty interaction things that might fit. How does this help the student?
Well, I think it helps the student because now when you have a workshop, say for example, it's about leading discussion. What will happen is somebody—
I mean, with the students?
With a faculty member, with a faculty member. And we'll get together 40 people. And all of a sudden, people will start to learn different discussion techniques. They'll learn what other people are doing. And what that does is that means that myself as a faculty member and others will go back to our classrooms, we'll go back to our syllabuses, and we'll start trying different things. I've seen people completely redesign courses based on what they have learned. I've seen people go back to their classroom and say, wow, that was a really good idea I learned. I'm just going to completely try something different today. I'm going to not lecture. I'm just going to try one of these new techniques that I learned and see how it goes. And what I've seen with the students is they've seen a revitalized enthusiasm from faculty members. Faculty members are starting to pay attention now to the reaction they get from students.
That's great.
To trying something that they never thought of before that works. And it makes their life a lot more enjoyable, the interaction between themselves and the students a lot better. So it's really improved.
I can really appreciate that. I can imagine that as one teaches a class, if you focus on doing what you've always done, mm-hmm. you're not focusing on how it could be better. You're just focusing on doing it.
Yes.
And now, now suddenly you're focusing on how effective what you're doing is.
It's very important, and there's a lot of times people do not have time to read the literature that's out there. And one of the things that I send out every week is my Thursday Tribune, and I target
like
the articles that I put in there based on what's going on that time in the semester, whether it be grading, whether it be trying to use a new student engagement technique. And faculty members have emailed me and said, I tried this. I'm so thankful that you sent this to me, and it really worked.
Awesome.
And then you share it with the rest of the faculty, and they try it. So it's just, I think, the role that I have is something that people have always needed but didn't exist. And because I still teach 2 classes, I somewhat have the pulse of what's going on in the classroom as well.
So you're kind of like another person, like you're not the chair of a department, but you're helping to coordinate a lot of things.
Yes,
that's great.
I'm part of academic affairs, and so
okay.
I'm an administrator with teaching duties. So part of 50% of my time is supposed to be for the center, 50% to teaching right now.
It's good to have a little way to judge.
A little, yes.
Yeah,
it is. Yes.
So you have a new, I'm forgetting the name, Education of a Lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
That's the new Siena
Motto. Title,
okay.
Motto, title of our strategic plan.
Okay,
yes.
both. Now what is that, and how does that fit in with what you're doing?
Well, I think education of a lifetime refers to the fact that Siena is now focusing on what our students are coming out with in terms of, we have a big service learning initiative. We have a big Franciscan core values initiative as well. So we're looking at the student as a whole. So they're not only getting the education in the classroom, but they're getting education about how to live in the community and be involved in civic activities, volunteerism. So you're looking at trying to educate the whole person versus just the textbook version of it.
And that fits in well with the general liberal arts tradition.
It does.
But now it's maybe pumped up a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of the students again, now you've got the professors who are working more efficiently. They're involving the students more effectively in discourse. Mm-hmm. But what else in this plan is something that Siena is working on? Well,
one of the new things this year was that our first year seminar was reconfigured. We've always had foundations, a first-year experience.
So the classroom experience is a little bit different.
It's very different. We also now have freshman-only sections of our core courses, which means that freshmen will be able to register for core courses at the very beginning. They'll be in classes with only people at their level. So in the past, it was difficult for them sometimes to make the transition.
So they were competing against people who are more experienced.
And difficult to make the transition. Mm-hmm. So there's been a major focus not only at the administration and the admissions level, but also in coordination with me to provide support for these faculty members who are looking at dealing with first-year students, which
right.
is a little bit different sometimes. It's a joy because they're fresh and they're enthusiastic. But it also requires a different take on things, maybe taking things a little slower, working a little bit more on basic elements of courses versus being extremely theoretical.
So really being successful is the main focus.
It is, and I think retaining people, giving people the skills to succeed at Siena, but also to succeed when they leave after 4 years, to make sure that they're starting out on the right footing and that progressively throughout their career at Siena, we provide the skills that they need.
I don't know whether to go next to one of the things you just said, the ethical foundation. Mm-hmm. You referred to it as Franciscan. Mm-hmm. Well, let's just look at that for a second. Okay. What does that mean to the student?
Well, that was an interesting conversation we had as well. I have a first-year faculty breakfast that I run once a month for the 27 new faculty members. And we invited 2 of the friars, one who's the head of the Franciscan Center on campus, to come and talk about what it meant to be Franciscan. And they're working on a list of about, I think it's 10 things to define what Franciscan values are. But I think their best definition was, it's just the way that we conduct ourselves in the classroom and on campus.
And then by extension, when you get out.
Yeah, it's definitely a different feeling. I taught at SUNY Binghamton, I taught at the College of St. Rose, and when you walk onto campus at Siena, I told new faculty members at orientation, you will probably not walk across campus without a student saying hello to you, without a student holding the door for you.
Wow, do their jaws drop?
They do, and people who have come from bigger institutions, and I've discussed this with them because they've been there for a semester, say that they finally found the place that they never want to leave. Wow. That this is just, the students are very respectful, the faculty members are very respectful to each other, and it's just the idea, maybe I think people think Franciscan means Catholic. I think it just means the way you conduct yourself, the way you treat each other, and when you leave Siena, the way you treat,
so it's moral, ethical standards or behavior? I
believe so. And I think people have thought, well, this means that when I come on campus that we'll pray before classes. And
right.
But it's not. I think the Franciscan friars are very good at explaining to people that they live a certain way. And it's not that it's necessarily a Catholic way. It's a moral, ethical, and sort of socially responsible way.
I went to a public community college when well, much younger than now, and I took a philosophy course, and I was a little bit surprised. I had a discussion with a priest who was teaching a philosophy class, and this was one of the most interesting discussions I had had in a long time. It wasn't like he was preaching to me. It was really respecting and interrogating ideas. It was wonderful.
Yes, and I think many of them teach at Siena, and they teach history, they teach computer science, they don't necessarily teach religion, all of them. And I think that they bring a very important element to the classroom. And they're very, as you said, because of their theological background, they're thinkers, they're very analytical. And
that's exciting in itself.
It is. Yeah. And I think the students find the whole experience. They held a breakfast. Actually, it was a dinner with the friars for the students. They limited it to 30. There was a waiting list of about 200.
That's like a job application line.
It is. So it just goes to show that it doesn't matter what religious background you're coming from. If you're coming from no religious background, it represents something very, very important to the students and very, very important to Siena.
So it's like recognizing a hunger that we all have and actually finding a way to be satisfied. And then once you get that, you don't want to give it up.
Yes, yes, I agree.
I think everybody can understand what ethics and morals are. We don't always act the way we know we think we should, but there was another thing I came across that you're working on, and that is communication and writing.
Yes.
Now that sounds like a real challenge.
It is, and we, I think, have addressed that for a century. I often like to look at comments that people made in the 1950s or 1960s. I think it's always a balancing act on how to deal with what is going on in high schools. It's different. Also, what the expectations are of people who have been educated like myself 20-odd years ago. And so it's always this time period where people have to figure out, is it basic skills that students need from us at the very, very beginning? Is it analytical thinking that they need? So right now, there's a discussion going on campus. Because of our initiatives to diversify, to increase our student body, do we need to alter somewhat, not only how we're educating our students, but do we as faculty members need to get together and educate ourselves about how to teach writing?
And that's really where your work comes in.
Yes, I'm working on a writing institute, which is tied in with the writing intensive courses on campus, where faculty members will come for 2 days and work on putting writing into their courses. We'll meet periodically through the semester. And it really is re-educating for all of us.
How can you make that even possible? It sounds to me like, you know, everything today goes with computers, and if you can't have the computer grade the test, it's just not efficient. Well, writing is just the opposite, isn't it?
Well, it is, and I think there's a lot of support for essay exams, and there are also writing requirements for every core course. And there are also disciplines across campus, biology, business, who have communications courses. And I think what is taking place on campus now, which is very important, is that there's always the thought that it was only the liberal arts or English that was concerned about writing.
Right.
It's everybody. I actually believe somewhat that the scientists have to be more analytical in their writing. For journals.
Well, how do they communicate with their colleagues, even if they can't write?
Yes, well, that's what we're working on. We're working on trying to figure out on campus how to institute more writing across the curriculum and to not only meet the basic needs, but also the higher level needs of thinking and analysis.
As painful as it is to learn sometimes something that you really need to know, I think sometimes that's even a judge of what you need. If it hurts a little bit to do it, it's probably because you're not very good at it and you really should be.
Well, I think the other thing that's beneficial to faculty members is we need to publish journal articles and books. So going through a writing institute or writing training will help you in your professional career and your research, because you'll go back and start to think, well, this is the way I'm teaching my students, and these are the methods, these are the revisions and the certain rubrics and things that I need to follow for my students. If I follow this in my own writing and research, it will make my goals of publishing and getting my research out there a lot easier. So it's kind of a two-prong thing. So we're in that discussion, as are many institutions at this point. But I think each institution has different needs, and right now we're at the stage of trying to figure out how to meet those needs. And I think that'll be beneficial for the students and also for the faculty members.
I just want to have one little follow-up. I don't want to beat this horse to death. I just think writing is so important and communicating is so important. You mentioned that, was it the 50s? You go back and you read. Were you saying that even though we think today people are much worse at writing because, well, we see the texting thing and you or us, and there's just a U and an R and a plus, and you know, the shortest thing, and forget about tenses and subjective moods. This is totally impossible.
Yeah.
Has it not really gotten worse? Has it just always been difficult?
I think it all depends on the people who are looking at it. Somebody sent me an article written by a Berkeley professor, and he went all the way back to comments that were made by faculty members. He went back several decades. And I think that you always are a little bit different than the students that you're teaching. I think you always look at student writing from your own expectations. But I think what we have right now is that students are extremely good at being creative. They're extremely good about expressing themselves in different mediums, whether it be through PowerPoints.
I'm impressed.
Whether, you know, but they don't read a lot in high school. They don't know how to form an argument. So really what needs to be done is you need to mold what they're coming in with.
So maybe they came in with different weaknesses than the people in the 50s, but they all have and have had weaknesses.
We all call it writing, but it's different aspects of writing that I think that need to be focused on. So now, in the 50s, people may have been very good, say for example, at grammar or punctuation, but they weren't very creative.
Right.
Now, somewhat,
they're creative, but they're wildly inaccurate with saying what they mean.
Free thinking stream of consciousness was one thing that was very important. You know, you didn't want to limit somebody's way that they express themselves. But in certain disciplines, actually all disciplines, you have to be able to take those ideas and make a reasonable argument. And right now, that's at the collegiate level. It's not something that happens at the high school level.
I just had an interesting image. I don't know if it works. I hope so. A sculptor, and it could have been Rodin, I'm not sure, said that the thing is in the stone. What you're trying to do is actually in the stone, and you just have to see it.
Yes.
Well, I mean, maybe that's just he's a genius, and I can't even possibly relate, but obviously with sculpture, if you try to go off the topic, you're not going to have anything that looks anything like what somebody's expecting to see or could understand. And so what I see, I edited a journal, and people go off on tangents, and then they don't give enough information about what they're trying to say.
Yeah, and I think there's lost the art of outlining and trying to organize your thoughts. So I think a lot of will happen at Siena is that people are going to see that there's room for both. That creativity and organization. And a lot of people think, well, it's creativity first, it's editing second. Other people say it's outlining first, then you expand upon your argument. Our goal is, and my role as a faculty developer, is to listen to the needs of the faculty, also listen to the needs of the students, and figure out whether it be through workshops or through training or through literature, and I love this phrase, to create a culture that supports writing and supports different ideas about writing. I think sometimes people disagree about what way to approach it, but I think most people know what good writing is. That's the finished project.
Right.
And so we just need to figure out on campus how to merge all of these ideas together.
And really, I think nothing came first. It's the chicken and the egg. Neither came first.
No.
It's interactive.
It is, and I think really bringing different departments together and faculty members together who have worked on this for years and may think that their approaches are different, but really I think if you gave them a student writing assignment, they all would say probably the same things. They would just approach it differently, how to fix it.
Okay.
But in the end, they would come out with the same product. So my job is very exciting right now, and the center because it's so new. I'm doing a lot with trying to figure out the needs of the faculty, but definitely the writing, and focusing on our new students and first year students and how to help them and through training the faculty.
A couple more questions before we go. We're almost to the end, but in terms of professional things versus art things, how do you balance those? I noticed you've got a few professional kind of schools, and there was something about, was it cosmetology, or what was the
We have social work.
Social work.
Yes.
And computing.
Yes, and computing. They actually, and business,
Okay,
really a lot of business.
Right. And you have that center, I never remember what it's called, but it's incredible, where there's a stock exchange.
Oh, yes,
and,
yes.
Right.
Yes. We have the stock market trading room and
Right,
all of
right.
that, yes. I think actually what's very intriguing about Siena is that we have both. And I think talking with faculty members who are in, say, social work, for example, they are very much in touch with what employers want. And so
Magic word here.
Yes. You know,
Right.
what skills are needed. Business as well, very, very focused on, and things like accounting, very much in tune. They actually are very helpful. And bringing them into the conversation is very helpful to somebody like me who's a historian, or other people in other disciplines. Because what it really does is it makes us focus on one thing that's very, very key right now in education. And that is students will only be engaged and pay attention to something that they think is relevant to their lives and their lives outside of Siena once they're gone. And what we've learned through different workshops and through communications is social work does this very well. Business uses these exercises. I can bring that into my classroom as a historian. People can bring that into their English classes. And in that way, they're engaging students more, and students are taking more away from the classroom. So we're learning from those who have more professional disciplines than the sort of traditional academic ones.
I think that's a great place to wrap up. You know, when you talk about getting a job, and but then not just getting a job, but there's work-life balance. And so it seems like you're really working to get both. Now, there's one aspect. The student may think he knows or she knows what the world wants and what they need. How do you get them to understand the things that maybe they didn't realize they needed?
Yes. Well, I think a couple of things. I think a lot of students sometimes appreciate hearing about faculty members' work-life balances. A lot of faculty members have talked to students about what it's like to go to graduate school, what their life was like as a student, and what they did at an undergraduate level that now they use. Also bringing in people who have graduated from Siena, alumni who have graduated and can relate to the students. We're talking about alumni who have only been gone a few years, but to bring them back.
So they can really see both.
They can see the value. They can come back and say, well, I took this course from this professor, and I learned these skills. And believe it or not, the skills that I learned in this class, I use in my job as an accountant, or I use this in my job as a lawyer. And I think it's a couple of things. You know, I think it's the faculty members being more, and they are. We balance our lives, and to see how alumni.
And in one way, I guess it's built into Siena about the balance. That's the religious, the Franciscan aspect.
Yeah.
That life is more than what kind of car you end up driving.
It is, and I think as a faculty developer, one of the things that I really like is there are three parts of it. One's faculty member as an instructor, faculty member as a researcher, but my favorite, the wellness and well-being of the faculty member. And that's one of the things in terms of stress management and in terms of consultations that I can offer to faculty members that sometimes they have never had before. They would go to their department chair or one of their colleagues. They can find a place in my office to come in, have a cup of coffee, have a confidential ear to just sit down and just discuss what's going on and trying to figure out how to manage all of that.
That's great.
Wonderful.
Well, I really thank you for being here. We so appreciate Siena being in Colonie, and are really happy that you're doing so well and helps us do well.
Thank you, and I appreciate you having me here to talk about the new center, and hopefully I will hear from some alumni and other people about how they can help with my faculty development. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Claire.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this edition of The Money Factor and that you have a great week.
Welcome to Channel 17, the Town of Colonie Government Channel.